Hi everyone, welcome back. This week, we will diving into something that's super essential in our field, designing experiments for research in social work. Now, I know experiment design might sound a bit daunting, but trust me, it's incredibly exciting once you get the hang of it. Think of it this way. When we are out there working with communities, we want to know for sure what works and what doesn't, right? Well, that's exactly where a solid experiment design comes in. It's our roadmap for uncovering the real effects of the social programs and interventions we are passionate about. So today we are going to break it down. What does a good experiment look like? And how do we make sure we're really measuring what we think we are measuring? And hey, we cannot forget about ethics. We are dealing with real people's life here. So we've got to do with this with care and respect. So by the end of this video, you will have a bunch of tools to create your own research that can really back up the amazing work you do. And the best part is you will be able to share that knowledge confidently, knowing it's built on solid, evidence-based research. Okay, let's get started and have some fun along the way. So for in-person sessions, we usually kick things off with an activity that gets our research gears turning. But for online sessions, I will guide you through the lecture where we will unravel the mysteries of designing experiment. You will also see the discussion and exercise where I usually give in-person sessions where other students play detective, piecing together the puzzle of a perfect experiment design. Regarding assignment 2, I will publish another video discussing assignment 1, like what I did for assignment 1. Okay, so let's chat about something that's super important in our research adventures, research design. I like to think of it as our research roadmap. It's all about the choices we make when we are planning and running a study. And believe me, those choices matter. First, we have sampling. It's like deciding who is going to be invited to our research party. We need to figure out who we are starting to make sure our findings are legit. Then that's measurement. This is about how we are going to capture the information we need. And we are going to use surveys, interviews, or something else. It's a bit like choosing the right lens for a camera to get a clear picture. Now, data collection is where the rubber meets the road. It's all about gathering the evidence, whether it's numbers, stories, or observations. It's the bread and butter of a research sandwich. And we cannot forget the logical arrangement, the setup that lets us make smart inferences. It's the difference between just having a bunch of data and actually being able to say something meaningful about it. So how do we decide on the design? We think about our research goals, what we are going to try to find out, and the types of inference we want to make. What conclusions do we want to draw from our data? It's a bit like being a detective. We have a case to solve, and we need to choose the right tools and methods to crack it. So let's put on our detective hats and starting piecing together our research design puzzle, ready to play Sherlock Holmes in the world of social work research. So we are going to play around some core concepts that are building blocks of any research project. You know, the stuff that help us get from is, I wonder to now understand. So first, we have causality. It's the why behind the what. We are not just looking at what happens, but why it happens. It's like figuring out why your best friends always laughs at your jokes. It is a joke itself, or because they're just being nice. Then we got our independent variable, the one we tinker with to see what happens. It's like adjusting the volume on your music and seeing how it changes the vibe of your party. The dependent variable is the life of the party, is what reacts to our tricks. If the independent variable is a volume knob, then the dependent variable is your neighbor knocking on your door to tell you they love the song or keep it down. Now the confounding variable is like the party crasher. It's that sneaky factor that might mess with our results. Like, oh, is this really the volume that's bothering your neighbor? Or is it because they are trying to sleep? And finally, experimental designs. This is where we plan out how to control all these variables. It's like creating the perfect playlist for the party to keep everyone grooving without any unexpected cues throwing off the groove. So let's get into it and see how we can design our own experiments to really understand the cause and effect in the social issues we care about. We turn our attention to a fundamental concept in research methodology, causality. Causality refers to the relationship between cause and effect. It is the principle that allows us to demonstrate that one event is the result of the occurrence of another event. Consider this statement: increased social support leads to better mental health outcome. So here, the increase in social support is considered as the cause, and the improvement in mental health is the effect. When we talk about causal inference, we are making a claim that an event, the cause, is responsible for producing a change in another event, the effect. Understanding causality is crucial for social work practice. It empowers us to identify which interventions are truly effective and which are not. By establishing a clear causal relationship, we can advocate for policies and practices that have a tangible and positive impact on the community we serve. The primary aim here is to test a hypothesis that proposes a causal relationship where one variable is presumed to cause another variable y. So for instance, let's consider exposure therapy, a psychometrical treatment that has been shown to reduce the fear of flying in clients. This is a scenario where we hypothesize that the therapy X causes a reduction in fear Y. When we speak of design type, we often refer to true experimental design as a gold standard for establishing causality. This type of design allows us to confidentially demonstrate that X causes Y. So for example, when we claim homework causes global warming, we are suggesting a direct causal link that would need to be investigated through rigorous experimental procedure. To illustrate, a study might compare the depression level in patients participating in 30 minutes of exercise therapy 5 days a week with those prescribed 100 milligrams of daily Zoloft. Another example could be the exploration of the effects of sleep deprivation, hypothesizing that reducing hours of sleep to below 7 hours a night for some weeks causes cognitive decline, including both short and long-term memory problems. So in each of these cases, the research design must meticulously control for confounding variable and ensure the relationship between X and Y is not spurious, but indeed causal. The purpose of a correlational design is not to establish causal, but to identify whether an association exists between two variables. This approach is particularly useful when real experimental conditions are not feasible, and we cannot control every aspect of the research environment. For instance, we may not have conclusive evidence to claim that one variable X causes another Y. but we can certainly explore whether they are connected in some manner. For example, the study of body image, we might observe that positive or negative body image in young women is associated with variables like ethnicity or social class. Here, we are not asserting that causation, but acknowledging an observable link. Even within a correlational framework, we operate under hypotheses. For example, we can hypothesize that there's an association between study habits X and academic performance Y, but we refrain from claiming that one causes the other without further evidence. We also examine the strength and direction of the relationship. Does the occurrence of depression correlate with alcoholism in adolescent males? And if so, how strongly are these variables related? Is the relationship positive or negative? The designs we discuss, including correlational and quasi-experimental designs, allow us to explore these associations to a significant extent. They provide valuable insights, while not definitive in establishing causality, are indispensable in the development of evidence-based practice. As we engage with rigorous demands of social work research, it's critical to understand the conditions under which we can justifiably conclude causality. Today, we will discuss the 3 necessary conditions that must be met to establish a causal relationship between variables. First, there must be an empirical relationship between the independent variable, which is a presumed cause, and the dependent variable, which is the observed effect. The relationship must be demonstrable through empirical evidence rather than theoretical supposition alone. And second, the condition of temporally must be satisfied. This means that the cause or the independent variable must precede the effect, the dependent variable, in time. Without this temporal precedence, we cannot inform that the cause actually leads to the effect. Lastly, we must account for the possibility of confounding variable. These are extraneous factors that could potentially explain the relationship between independent variable and dependent variables. To conclude causality, we must ensure that the relationship we observe is not due to influence of another variable, but it is indeed a direct consequence of the independent variable upon the dependent variable. So in our practical application within social work, these conditions guide us in designing research that can produce reliable and valid conclusions about the causal relationship that inform our practice. In the context of social work research, when we refer to an intervention, we are discussing it as an independent variable. This variable is the one we manipulate to observe the effect it has on the dependent variable. The intervention as an independent variable is assumed to be the catalyst that precipitates change within the dependent variable. So for example, in a study designed to measure the effectiveness of a new counseling approach for reducing anxiety, the counseling method would be our independent variable. The change we are looking to measure, the reduction in anxiety levels, is the dependent variable. It is imperative to understand that the intervention must be under the direct control of the researcher. This means that the researcher can manipulate the independent variable in a systematic manner. By controlling the intervention, the researcher is able to observe the resulting changes in the dependent variable and thereby examine the efficacy of the intervention. This controlled manipulation is what allows us to draw a conclusion about the causality between the independent variable and the dependent variable. Without this control, we cannot confidently demonstrate that the intervention is responsible for the observed changes. The dependent variable is the subject of our inquiry, the aspect of our study that we expect to change as a result of manipulation of the independent variable, which is the intervention in this context. The fundamental assumption we make is that the outcome is contingent upon or caused by the intervention. This causal relationship is at the heart of our research. When we implement a specific social work intervention, the resultant effect on the population or issue being studied is what we are endeavoring to measure and understand. The dependent variable is thus amply named because its value depends upon the conditions set forth by the independent variable. It is what we observe and record to determine the effectiveness or the impact of our intervention. This variable is also referred to as the effect variable because it is effect of our experimental conditions. Alternatively, calling it the outcome variable emphasizes its role as the ultimate result we are investigating. In social work research, the dependent variable can range from a quantifiable entity, such as the number of employment opportunities created by a social program, to a more subjective measure, such as the improvement in mental health status following an intervention. In our scientific inquiry within the realm of social work research, we must give due attention to a critical concept known as confounding variable. A confounding variable acts as an alternative cause, presenting a challenge in establishing a clear causal relationship between the intervention and the outcome. This variable occurs simultaneously within the intervention and has the potential to independently affect the outcome. Its presence introduces an additional layer of complexity, as it may produce effects that confound or confuse the relationship we are attempting to study. For example, if we are examining the effectiveness of a new educational program on improving students' test scores, a confounding variable might be the intrinsic motivation level of the students, which could independently influence their performance irrespective of their education intervention. The art and science of the research demand that we identify this confounding variable and account for them through our experimental design. This may involve stratification, matching, or statistical control, which help us isolate the effect of the intervention from the confounding influences. So this is the end of this short video. Next video, we will talk about experimental design.